Hey guys, back for another podcast. Just one thing I thought I'd touch on because I noticed it after the first one, but I did not pick this wallpaper. It's actually my room, and I'm pretty sure my house was built in the 1950s, so we're just gonna have to deal with the very nice and flowery background. But here to talk today about virtual reality in games. This was a big thing that just came out of this year's E3. A lot of people are excited about it. Most notably, Sony had a lot of demos showing it off, and it seems like it's sort of the big niche in gaming right now. And I'm sort of going to give my impressions on it. One thing I noticed about it is it seems like the games that were going to be offered in virtual reality were more so going to be almost gimmicky. It seemed like the Batman Arkham game was more of a short Batman Arkham demo that they sort of put in a VR spin, and some of the other games too. It just seems like they're taking existing products and sort of just making them VR for the sake of making them VR, but almost stripping the game down in order to make it VR because they don't want to go back and make the entire game VR compatible. That's something that really worries me about VR because I feel like if they want to do it, they need to do it right because if they don't do it right the first time, then they can't come back a second time and try to convince gamers that this time it'll be different. In my mind, it's almost like motion controls. Gamers were very excited for motion controls, thought that they were going to be the future of gaming, and then it seemed like no matter what game the motion controls were used on, they were used poorly and almost shoehorned in simply for the sake that they could market their game as being a motion controlled game. And now we see that motion controls have all but left the gaming industry, and now we're moving on to the next thing in VR. Another thing that worries me about it is the price point. I looked it up. It looks like the PlayStation VR headset is going to be right around $400. And I'm not really sure how you can convince video game buyers who don't have very deep pockets to spend what essentially amounts to what their system cost them in the first place in order to get a VR headset, which from first reports sounds like it's actually less powerful and in less useful than the Oculus Rift and some of the other VR headsets we've seen released so far. That being said, I know that the PlayStation VR headset is noticeably cheaper than the Oculus Rift and some of its competitors, but I still think that you're playing a dangerous game if you release what amounts to be weakened hardware just for the sake of being able to have sort of the gimmick that you have virtual reality games. And then lastly, just touching on the first topic, my biggest worry is will developers see this as a viable option and decide that they want to make games that are in virtual reality? Because the biggest test of whether or not hardware succeeds or not is can these game develop companies like Sony and Microsoft, if they get in on the VR gaming as well, which they probably will to keep competition and pace, can they convince these game companies that this is a viable option and something that they should sink their dollars into? Because my PlayStation can do all the VR work it wants to, but if big game companies don't decide to make their games in virtual reality to support this headset, you're just going to see this be another thing that goes to the wayside as a gimmick and something that people sort of look back on as remember when they tried that and talk about how much it failed, and we're just going to see all these VR headsets collect dust in dumpsters behind GameStops. And I think VR is something that I'd be very excited about. It's just that I really think you have to do it the right way the first time because in the gaming industry, like a lot of other industries, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And if you mess that up, chances are you guys just move on to the next one because the VR will just be dead if they don't get it right the first time.